So metaverse, Web3, blockchain, NFTs, these are buzzwords that we hear on a daily basis now, and not just amongst ecosystem participants. Decentralization permeates more of our lives as we continue to see this transfer from Web 2, where power and ownership are in the hands of a few corporate giants, to Web 3, where we're heading to the hands of the individuals. Web 3 represents a more decentralized and open web governed by blockchains, allowing us to get more real utility out of everything. But we're still very much in the first inning. In January, OpenSea, the world's largest NFT exchange, generated over $3 billion in transactions, growing 950% month over month. Exchanges saw over $14 trillion in trade volume in 2021. All of these changes are happening at unprecedented speed, second perhaps only to the speed of changes happening inside this country. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia under Vision 2030 is seeing unprecedented speed as we've been experiencing for the last 4 days, showing the Catalyze participants the speed of change that is happening, and that the transformation in Saudi Arabia is truly incredible. So the Kingdom has been following these trends closely. During the opening day of the Leap 22 technology platform in Riyadh, the Kingdom announced more than $6.4 billion in investments for future technologies, furthering its position as MENA's digital economy leader. The Kingdom has also announced plans to build its own metaverse, following the steps in other sovereign entities such as Hong Kong. Saudi Arabia's games market reached $1 billion in 2021, with the highest value among the Arab countries of the Gulf. With a majority of players under 35 and 60% of the population in Saudi under the age of 30, these trends are likely to continue, and the opportunities within these spaces are going to continue to grow. Saudi Arabia has a ministry of esports, unlike, I think, any other country. Saudi has launched a group to develop the video gaming industry. PIF's homegrown portfolio company, Savvy Gaming, which has recently acquired esports companies ESL Gaming and Faceit. 77% of Saudi Arabia claim to be aware of this space as an asset class, and 18% are trading or claim to have traded cryptocurrencies. So it's clear that there's a ton of opportunity here, and we have 4 of the brightest minds in this space. So I'd like to turn it over to them to enlighten us today on the potential of the digital ownership economy. So guys, as I get to you to ask you your first question, if you could introduce yourselves and your firm and what you're focused on to the audience here. So I think we'll start with Jonathan, and we will go broad. So maybe you can introduce yourself first, and then you can tell us, how does crypto change the world?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. This has been a really wonderful trip, and really great to be here in Saudi Arabia for my first time. It's amazing things you guys are doing in this country. I guess I'm one of the founding partners of Tribe Capital, a venture capital firm located in San Francisco. We do a variety of sort of conventional venture capital that focuses across fintech, B2B software companies, as well as several crypto things. We have a crypto fund, and we invest in all manner of crypto-related things. I guess high level, when we think about crypto, the whole space, when this whole thing kind of started about 12 years ago, it was just Bitcoin. That was kind of the only thing you could buy, right? There was this amazing thing that showed you could own a thing, a Bitcoin, right, on some ledger that nobody wrote down. No single person had any control over. When we think about sort of the last, 10-ish years of evolution, in particular the last couple of years of evolution, where we are right now, when I think about sort of mapping this out, you have this family of sort of underlying blockchains. You can't really buy those, okay, by their very nature. They're decentralized. Now, what you can buy are their governance tokens or some form of utility token. So there's a whole family of tokens that relate to the utility of the underlying computational sort of platform, okay? There's a whole other family of things, NFTs, which is sort of another category of, you could call them assets, but I kind of maybe think of it more like a technological primitive that have some applications, in particular the video gaming applications that we'll talk about today. There are also stable coins, which are a really big thing that happened over this last year. Well, I mean, they've been around for longer than a year, but they've really shown themselves to be much more robust probably than people thought over this last year, which has a lot of interesting implications when you sort of unwind what that means. And then, of course, there's like, crypto companies themselves who have equity, traditional companies that have equity that one could, continue to own. The equity value of these companies has been going up by massive amounts in a way that is, largely correlated with the underlying value in these assets that are more purely crypto native within both these decentralized organizations and more centralized organizations. But that's kind of the whole platform, the whole plethora of things that are going on in our mind. And when we think about like how this could change the world, we invest in this stuff because we think it feels a lot to us, sort of like the internet, circa 1998. I don't know how many of you were using the internet in circa 1998. It seemed like a bunch of crap that was like valued a lot, and it was very hard to tell what was noise, what was signal, right? It's like, oh, you had pets.com, that seems totally useful, that seemed like a reasonable thing, and you have this Google thing. It's a web page, it's got a box on it, I guess. I don't know, who knows? They could both be valuable. But of course, we had to go through this .com period where like true economic value could show itself, sustainable economic value, and of course one of those two entities continued to survive and one of them did not, okay? So, many people in here might think we're in the middle of a crypto bubble, it's all like giant Ponzi scheme. Well, you might be right, but the thing is that you need the Ponzi schemes, you need the bubbles, you need the froth, because it's in the froth that the system explores all these weird corners of possibility space, and then one or two of those corners are going to become real. And so we're in this weird phase right now, we're not sure what it's going to be. It's all figuring itself out right now. A lot of these applications we'll talk about today are like maybe 2 years old, 1 year old. People barely know what they are, what they're capable of. And so, our hope is, as a firm, our hope is that, well, actually, I guess macroscopically, we believe that some of these things will become this next phase of massive, innovative companies. They may not even be companies, decentralized organizations. You could think of them as social economic phenomena that are just moving around. Companies are social economic phenomena, right? But these decentralized organizations are some other form. There'll be some of these things that become big and important, and we hope that we can catch one, and hopefully not catch too much of the noise. That's our hope.
Great. So Sam, we'll go to you next, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the importance of gaming to the crypto community. And so I guess when I look at your background, and you can introduce yourself and your firm more, but coming from like Harvard Law School education and traditional media, how did you transition from that into Web3? And maybe you can kind of weave in the importance of gaming into that story as well for us.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sam Engelbart. I co-founded a company called Galaxy Digital, which is a merchant bank focused on blockchain and crypto technology. And then shortly thereafter, founded a business called Galaxy Interactive, which is a traditionally structured venture franchise. We focus entirely on companies operating at the intersection of content, finance, and infrastructure technology. I stumbled on crypto, I would say, more as a result of being an investor in, as Louise mentioned, in traditional media and entertainment. And I think I was from 2001 or 2 until 2010, when I invested in my first video game studio, I was investing in every type of sort of sleepy old media company that you could possibly be involved with. I always joke that if there was a media company in secular decline at that time, I was probably involved in building it in some way or investing in it. This is movie theaters, television stations. I did a large roll-up of record labels, built 2 different chains of movie theaters, film production, television, that sort of thing. And I think as I was in that world and investing and attempting to understand where the trends in media and entertainment were going, it was impossible then, and I think it's far harder even now, to deny what young people were interested in and the extent to which video games and their involvement and participation in immersive digital worlds was going to be such an important part of all of these people's lives. And so I made a video game studio investment in 2010. By that point, I was sort of an active board member of what ended up, by the time we were done building it, became the 4th largest chain of movie theaters in the United States. And it was kind of a boring business to be involved with then. And I was in my late 20s and looking for something more interesting to do. And so I sort of got very involved in early stage technology and got interested in emerging media tech, and video games were a place to start. And it was because of the people that I met in the video game world that I was introduced to Bitcoin first, and then more broadly to blockchain technology. The thing that a lot of people, I don't think, fully realize still is that if you were introduced to Bitcoin in 2010 or 11, and I didn't actually buy Bitcoin until 2012, but if you met people then that were involved in Bitcoin or talking to you about blockchain technology, they really came from one of two places. They would have come from the sort of cyberpunk hacking community, or they would have come from the video game community. And I think it's really important to remember that as we jump forward to today, because the video game community and the people who have been involved both in playing games and building games over the last 25 years in particular have been comfortable longer than anybody with the idea that digital objects can have real value. And so going back to 2000, smart gaming-focused entrepreneurs were building businesses and marketplaces for the purchase and sale of digital objects. We have these phenomena now that so many people hear about with play to earn and games where people are working and earning a living inside of these video game worlds. And people were doing some version of this 25 years ago in World of Warcraft and in EverQuest. The person who introduced me to Bitcoin and actually convinced me to buy my first Bitcoin in 2004 had 400,000 people on the ground in China going to work every day, what they call gold mining, in order to create an active marketplace for the sale of the digital objects in Warcraft and in EverQuest. So some version of this has been going on for a very long time, and that, fortunately, I think for me in the evolution of my career, I met these people, I understood and was learning and fascinated by games, was introduced to Bitcoin, and then, now going back to about 4 years ago, when my partner Richard, who's somewhere out here as well, when we were really looking out at the world and we were building this crypto-focused merchant bank, but we were really thinking to ourselves, where does crypto have the best chance of scaling? And this is really important, I think, for Saudi as well. Like when we asked ourselves, where on the application side of things are people going to be most receptive to this idea of engaging with digital objects and treating digital objects as things with value and objects that can really create status and ultimately, we believe, employment and wealth for people. To us, it was very obvious that we needed to go even deeper into gaming. And so from my perspective, and it's a biased one, obviously, I think there is no more exciting thing happening in the world today than the convergence of this massive growth trend in gaming in particular as the place where people are spending the majority of their time now, especially the younger generations, and then all of the technology that's driving decentralization of finance and the opportunity for people to really do business with each other from anywhere in the world at any age. And as those things start to converge and people spend more time in these digital worlds and are able to monetize what they do in those worlds, we're really going to see like transformational, once in a generation or less frequent types of changes in the world as a result.
Great. And so the digital world, understood for gaming, but we all still need a physical component to entertainment and to what we're doing. So I guess the next question will be directed towards Alex. So if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the entertainment park that you're building in Dubai and the focus on bridging that gap between the physical and virtual world.
For sure.
Walk me through the theme park. Tell me what it's like from beginning to end.
Sure, happy to share. Well, thank you so much for having me here, and Louise for inviting all of us, along with everyone here in Saudi, to be part of this great program. So my company, Hyperspace, founded the company about 1.5 years ago. We're based out of Dubai. We are fundamentally an amusement attractions development company, so very kind of tip of the iceberg. We build the future of the amusement park. That amusement park space kind of falls into kind of 3 categories. So you have basically entertainment, so this is a place where you come and have fun with friends and kind of really build on that location-based entertainment space. Kind of laddering up, these parks are very much built for social media and content creation. That's really fundamental to this. Spaces to come and create professional level and extraordinary content for your social media feed, and then moving from there, really the kind of Web 2 version of digital identity into kind of the future of the space, which is, how do we take, digital identity of today and kind of transcend it into more gaming spaces, et cetera. And so, digital assets, avatars, anything from sneakers to extraordinary blockchain-enabled fashion items, avatar creation, but building a physical front end for all of this. We like to say that, the NFT space in particular, very kind of mass and buzz, but niche in adoption, and the real kind of best use case for that is in the gaming space. And so for us, when you come to our park, you'll be confronted with all sorts of manner of kind of activities, from just traditional entertainment and experiential products. Walk into a giant projection map neighborhood that looks like you're standing in near future Tokyo at 4 a.m. And be handed a spray paint can with an infrared sensor inside and spray paint extraordinary messages on walls, to more kind of content creation stages. So one of my favorite experiences in the park is a space called U-Design in our design district. I should mention the park's being built in Dubai Mall. It's a 100,000 square foot space that we're building in Dubai Mall, really built kind of towards this more experiential retail ecosystem, so fitting kind of into the future of retail in that sense. But you walk into U-Design, it's in the middle of our design district, and you are confronted with a white holographic sneaker floating in space. This is a 2-meter sneaker. You're in the middle of a holographic pod, and you're prompted to speak to the sneaker. So you'll talk to this beautiful white floating object, and the sneaker's design is linked to 60 biomarkers in the human voice. So you will talk to it, and you can say, I love coming to Saudi, or I am, I founded Hyperspace, or any sort of, you can say anything. And basically, the sneaker's design is linked to the biomarkers in your voice, and this beautiful object starts flickering in front of you and changing shape, colorway, et cetera. Once you are finished talking, you've created this beautiful physical object, and you've poured it by scanning your RFID band that you're given in the park to kind of, it's kind of like a wallet, but it's really more of just kind of a web app that's running to kind of, navigate you through the digital layer of the park. And you can take that object, you can put it in augmented reality filter, and you can wear it on your feet immediately. You can actually mint it as an NFT right out of the app, and then, today you can bring it into, open world metaverse territories, and down the road, I think that there will be opportunity, hopefully, to work with gaming companies, as the kind of this space expands, obviously bring digital assets into other spaces in this ever-evolving world. So that's kind of a nice use case of kind of linking physical and digital. And so what we like to, when we look at the park at that kind of sector of what we do, or segment of what we do, we're kind of just handing this kind of new technology to a mass market audience in a very comfortable and easy to use way. And so
But everything you're creating to be used in the digital world. Is there a physical component to any of the things you're creating there?
Well, I mean, the park is physical in nature, so it's a place to come and create effectively, and it's a place to come and have fun and create content and create digital objects. And so when we look at, that physical front end to that sort of creation experience, you're making it quite tangible. You are giving people objects and giving them ownership of those objects. And I think that that's a kind of big hurdle to get over in the space. I think that there's a lot of enthusiasm and buzz around kind of future of digital identity, but the use case is still pretty small. And so what I'm very proud of, the fact that we're able to give our consumer base these digital objects and kind of just, in a very hands-off, easy and consumable way. I look at these objects really more as content, but, with this kind of interesting potential roadmap. So that's what we do, basically. That's our company.
I mean, I hear Alex, and we've been talking the last couple of days about what he's building, and again, I think about what's happening here in Saudi and the mandate that you all have to build so much physical infrastructure so quickly. And I mean, as somebody that used to have millions of people a year go through our physical boxes, and we had no really meaningful way to maintain and deepen a relationship with those customers at all. I mean, as everybody with the movie theater industry knows, we turn on the lights, we pop the popcorn, popcorn, like a studio markets to its customers with its own budget and relationships a film that it makes, and people come through and they watch the movie and they leave, and we hope that the next movie draws them back again. And so when I see whether it's Alex's Park or what I believe will be everybody building physical locations of any kind is going to be thinking about, is going to need to be integrating these technologies that allow you to know who you're dealing with and who your customer is, and then maintain like a relationship in an ongoing way. I say a lot, like NFTs and these technologies we're talking about, the future of them will be, there may be some expensive high-end collectible items, but for the most part, the great majority of the NFTs that you see in the world and the digital objects you see in the world are going to be free by necessity, because they simply are technologically the best CRM device that has ever been created. And the brands are starting to understand this now and recognize that the opportunity now to capture people in a physical place and then maintain a relationship with them everywhere they are is such an enormous game changer for anybody operating out-of-home venues of any kind, whether they're entertainment venues, whether they're schools and educational institutions, hospitals. Like, that we're really talking about a sea change in how brands and businesses and IP owners and creators talk to their customers on an ongoing basis. And so he's right at the front bleeding edge of that, which I think is so cool.
Thank you. But yeah, no, you're completely right. I think that, when we look at, owning a customer outside the four walls of an entertainment attraction, the way that we'll be able to communicate with customers, integrate brands into these sorts of products, and that brands can really transcend, their kind of four-wall retail spaces and kind of the idea of what it, means to own a pair of sneakers in a physical context versus a digital context, et cetera. You start really associating, physical identity and digital identity into this kind of merging world. I think it's like 90% of Gen Zers consider themselves gamers, and so they're buying video game skins, they're buying manners of digital identity, and they care a lot about that. They maybe care as much about it in the physical and digital world. So I think that obviously becomes, it is already an integral part of brand strategy, and so we definitely try to play a role in kind of bringing that to a consumer base in a very easy way.
So Murtaza, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about, when I think of sports, it's another very real world user base and fan base and consumer base when you think about sports. So how do we think about the video game market is now larger than movies and North American sports combined? And as chairman of One Football, how are you seeing opportunity in the space of sports and esports directly as it relates to this?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for having me and hosting us to such a great event. I think it's really telling when you have a minister of esports in a country that has such a strong and growing young population, because we do believe that between gaming and sports is probably one of the most powerful ways for mass adoption of blockchain technology. Taking a step back, I'm the managing partner of Liberty City Ventures. We're a blockchain-focused fund and incubator. So we spend about a third of our time trying to build companies, and two of the companies that we're known for, one is called Paxos, so this is the company that powers PayPal and Facebook's Novicoin, Revolut for all their buy and sell in crypto, and the other company is Luca, which is the company that helps you figure out your books and records. It's the official partner for CPA.com to help you pay your taxes in this world. Just going back to the question, we were really fascinated by what blockchain can do for sports. So, I'm here with my partner, Emil, and 4 years ago, we flew to Manchester City to meet with the Man City Football Club, and we proposed to them and said, look, blockchain technology, we believe, is radically going to change sports and customer engagement. And, we said there's a concept of digital collectibles where, because you could now, for the first time, uniquely own something digital, that we believe that there's a large play for this. But this was 4 years ago, and, the concept or the term of NFT, never really came about. And, the other thing that we were really interested in was another form of customer engagement within sports. And part of that journey was, we went to a lot of different sports club owners, and we asked them, do you know who is sitting in your seats? And, who is in there during the games at that given moment? And, the general consensus was that, they probably only knew 50% of the customers that were in the seats at the time, because often it goes through brokers and resellers. And that was another use case that we were thinking about in terms of for sports. And this is not just for like football, it's for any sports, because, through blockchain technology, now you have, you can do like two things. From an owner's perspective, you can do a drop of NFT through a simple email, and you can do it within the game, during halftime or anything like that. So now, at any given moment, you have a better sense of who's sitting in your seat, and you have access to their email, and there's better engagement. And from a fan's perspective, if I'm a fan and I can basically, if they know it's my birthday or I've been to, 5 games this season, the team can drop an NFT into your digital wallet, and maybe you're able to redeem it at the food stand, or maybe you get a discount for some memorabilia. But one of the companies, so this was 4 years ago, and it was just still too early. And about 3 years ago, we came across entrepreneur Lucas is also here for a company called OneFootball, and when we looked at it, we said, wow, they've already done the hard part by building the largest network of community and fans. They have over 100 million monthly active users. And we said, look, we're going to invest in you and become a blockchain partner, because you've already done the hard work. You've built the network, right? And the power of a network, if you look at Metcalfe's law, it's just the user base. And I think one of the things that they did really well is, in addition to the fan base, OneFootball, was able to bring in 12 of the top sports clubs, from Barcelona to Real Madrid to Man City, PSG, Bayern Munich, etc. And now you had a trusted community, and because you have the community between the fan base and the team, there were a lot less skeptical of like what can be done, whether it's in terms of NFTs, there's discussions on metaverse, but yeah, just between sports, which, football is 3 times the size of the NBA. There's about 3 billion football fans around the world. And then if you look at gaming, and then that's another, 3 billion users, and, it's bigger than the film and music industry combined. We really believe that this is one of the major ways that we'll see, major adoption of blockchain technology.
And can you talk to us about you hear the word community, and at the same time, decentralization. So what is the aspect of decentralization that is so important here to these communities? And I don't know, Jonathan, Murtaza, whichever of you want to take this. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the adversarial nature of what's going on here, and can we do anything to kind of regulate around some of the decentralization at one end, and why is it so important to this?
I mean, in terms of the fear that you mentioned, I think a lot of the fear is when, there's a lot of people that are approaching these clubs that, might not have the most buttoned-up backgrounds, and they're saying, hey, here's quick money, we can do NFT drops. But I think the real play is that if you build a two-way dialogue with the club owners, and I think the one thing that OneFootball did was really bring them into the ownership. So it's not an outsider. It's like they're part of the community that is actively discussing, hey, what can blockchain technology do? What can you do with NFTs? But it's really from a trusted party.
Yeah, I think when I think about the decentralization aspect, I guess it's probably maybe worth just stepping back a little bit and talking about what it is we're actually talking about here in more concrete terms. So like, what is the blockchain? Let's just make sure we agree on this, right? It's a ledger of ownership, okay? It's a ledger of ownership that nobody owns, You're like, yeah, I heard that before. But you have to think about how ridiculous that is, right? Like I was chatting with Emmett earlier, and he was like, well, like, you own something, no big deal. I'm like, well, not really. How do you know you own your car, right? Like, you only know because there's a record at a government office. The record says Jonathan owns this car. If you don't have that record, well, I mean, how do you know you own the car, right? The plus or minus of that is that there's a minister. There's a central authority that is deeming ownership, right? And, all ownership in the world as it stands right now is sort of under the purview of an authority some way, right? And the idea behind, decentralized ownership, and this is really kind of the amazing thing about Bitcoin, is that it is a record of ownership that literally nobody can touch. Like nobody can take it over, nobody can veto it. It just is. It's by its very nature, like you can't turn it off because it's fully decentralized. That's what we mean by decentralized here, right? There's no authority on top of it that can do anything to it. Now, so that's interesting. So you have this system where people can own stuff. Cool. Okay, so like what happens when you own things? Well, okay, you have a bunch of people owning things. Well, what's the point of owning things? Well, you would own something if you get personal utility from it. You look at it, you enjoy it, you consume it. Or maybe you want to trade it for someone else, right? Now, the immediate problem you run into is, okay, if people are trading things, a barter system becomes very cumbersome, so you need some medium of exchange. People thought Bitcoin was going to be the medium of exchange. Turns out that doesn't work because the price moves around, and it turns out, the purchasing power that I gave you today might be massively different tomorrow. Not great, okay? So you'd much prefer something that has stable purchasing power, right? And so this last year and a half, people kind of came up, well, it's longer than that, but people came up with stable coins, right? And there are many different iterations of stable coins that exist right now. The first versions of them were centralized. There was a company, like a literal company, C Corp, Delaware LLC, that's rigged up something, backed it, put I don't know, commercial paper into a bank account and then issued something. Those are the first versions. But now we're in this weird world where there exist stablecoins where there is no entity. There is no company. There is no LLC. It's just literally the protocol. The protocol is able to create it and somehow keep it stable. Now, if I were to tell you this 3 years ago, you should be like, that's absurd. I've read my economic history. That's not possible. And you would be right to be skeptical. And really what we saw this last year, right, and I think this is kind of why we're in a special time. We're in a special time right now because this last year has suggested that stable coins actually can be stable, this whole range of them. This last year, people made all these stable coins and people attacked them in all sorts of ways. This was the adversarial thing she was talking about. People try, because the nature of crypto is like it expects you to be trying to destroy it. It expects everybody to be trying to destroy it. Everybody's an adversary at all times. But that's a plus, right? Because that way the system overall can find the most stable configurations, can find the most anti-fragile configurations. And so here we are, we have stable coins now, a whole range of stable coins from fiat backed with a company all the way down to like purely algorithmic, and they exist out there in the wild, and they appear to be actually pretty stable to speculative attack, okay? So if you have that, right, you see what's going on here, right, is that the blockchain is like reinventing economic history, right? It's like, okay, it's somehow managed to invent a central bank on its own, right? It's inventing, okay, now presumably you would want to own things that are more than, simply exchange. That's kind of what NFTs are. That's like the consumable. Not really consumable, but it's the unique thing. You want to own it, you get utility out of owning it, right? But this other side, the stable coin, is the financial system, right? And now they've invented stable coins, right? And what's going on now is they're basically reinventing the entire stack of finance. Derivatives markets, futures, debt, lending, the entire stack, all of it, and it's all kind of being figured out. And so when we think about crypto really broadly, this is kind of the area that we tend to focus on because I mean, we all know the power of like finance, right? You see the power of finance in an economy, right? I mean, you can see what happens when it goes haywire, right? When economies have like too much of their GDP in the financial system, not good, right? You want more of the GDP to be in consumables. However, if you don't have a functioning finance system, it impedes your ability to create this true economic value, right? And so that's why we're like so focused on this piece here, because it's going to be important to link this stuff into the real world. In some sense, you can think of stablecoins as being the first real linkage into the real world. Alex's company is an example where he's talking about, okay, like, can we have a shoe that exists in the real world and in the metaverse at the same time? It's a little tricky to work that out. Stablecoin is actually kind of like that. The stablecoin is an example where there's something that's defined in the real world, a dollar, and you have now a representation of it on this ledger, right? But it's really just the first. In fact, there's a really interesting project in Wyoming. I don't know, do people here know about the Weird Wyoming project? I see, okay, I don't see any nodding heads. So in Wyoming, the state of Wyoming in the United States is the first state in the United States to recognize DAO ownership of an LLC. What does that mean? Okay, so an LLC is a company. In the United States, a company has to be owned at the end of the day by a person. A human being has to own it. A human being with like a tax ID number, you know, that the government can point at, right? But Wyoming has decided they will recognize the ownership of an LLC by a decentralized organization, which is bonkers if you think about it. What actually happens is there's like a law firm in between, and the law firm is a legal custodian and does what the DAO says, but it is the law firm sits there in the middle and has made a bunch of legal machinery around itself such that this thing actually works. But this is crazy if you think about this, right? So somebody has actually, in Wyoming, has transacted, exists a plot of land, I think it's like a few acres, that now exists on the blockchain. A DAO has purchased it, right? So nobody actually owns it. There is a decentralized organization that owns the piece of land legally according to the state of Wyoming. This is bonkers, right? Like, we started off with like a ledger where all you own is a goofy little Bitcoin, and now all of a sudden you can own a piece of land. And we're like 2 years into the game, 3 years into the game. So what happens in 4 years, 5 years, right? This is gonna become something really weird, and it's not really clear what. And that's kind of the gist of this bigger game that's going on.
And how do we think about, is there space for the traditional institution, the traditional financial institution here, Murtaza? Maybe you could give us a couple examples or cases where you've seen the older institution be able to adopt some of these technologies and take advantage of what's now available to them.
Sure. Yeah, one of the most exciting things that Paxos does is being a regulated entity, they're regulated by the Department of Financial Services of New York, so just a very strict regulatory authority, is that they've tokenized U.S.-listed equities. And, it's the first time that you're able to settle U.S.-listed equities at T+0, basically instantaneously. And, they're doing this right now with Bank of America, Nomura, Credit Suisse, SocGen. And why do you want to settle equities at T+0? From a bank's perspective, right, it's 70% cheaper to settle U.S.-listed equities using blockchain technology. Their liquidity constraints go away, and it's just cheaper, and it's more safe. And these use cases have been going on live now for over a year. So we see this as a significant de-risk to the U.S. financial system, because that whole issue that we had last year with the issue with Robinhood, Reddit, GameStop, a lot of these hedge funds getting massive losses was because U.S. equities take 2 days to settle. But here we view blockchain as one of the biggest agents of efficiencies of our time, and that's what it's solving.
So you talk about some of these exciting and interesting companies, and I guess for the audience, how do you think about accessing these opportunities? If you're a retail investor, a high net worth investor, if you're a fund that's sitting in Saudi, how are you getting access to these deals, if at all? Maybe, and any of you can kind of feel free to chime in here, but ideas for the investors that are sitting in this room, in this space, from like the more basic to the more complicated, where would you tell them to start?
I would just say if you don't have any exposure to crypto, find a regulated company or an exchange where you can open a wallet and just dabble in with something you're willing to lose. But we casually, this is not any financial advice, but we tell a lot of our friends who want to explore cryptocurrency for the first time, maybe, you do a portfolio where you buy 50% Bitcoins, maybe 25% Ethereum, and then there are other 25%, you can spread it around, maybe something into Solana or Poly or one of the other, tokens, but just get involved and find, an exchange or a wallet. There's Binance and Kraken and Coinbase and Paxos, a lot of great options out there.
I was a big crypto skeptic, to be clear, for a long time, and my mind was changed last year. I think because I have always wanted to find fundamental economic value, and I was just not convinced that there was fundamental economic value. I don't know, like a monkey. I'm sorry, like a GIF of whatever, some pixels of a monkey doesn't do it for me. There were some developments. We were actually investors in a protocol called Terra that runs the UST stablecoin. So it has a stablecoin that's attached to the blockchain. It's native to the blockchain. Its governance token is called Luna. Now, we made a big investment in Luna. Why? Partially because this is one of the first places that we've seen real economic value occurring in a decentralized environment. I'll tell you what it is. The real economic value is mostly encapsulated in a company. There's a company called ChaiPay. What is ChaiPay? ChaiPay is a payments company. B2B payments company, you make a website, you need to take payments, you use the ChaiPay API, and you receive payments. Cool, okay? And it happens to be a lower interchange rate than using Visa. Awesome. Turns out, what's going on under the hood is that when you click the button, it does the transaction through Tether, or sorry, not through Tether, through the UST, through the Terra stablecoin. And by doing the transaction through crypto, it is actually generating demand for the stablecoin, right? Thus actually providing some sort of actual value backup to the stablecoin, right? Like if you think about the US dollar, right? What is the US dollar really backed by? Well, the economy of the United States, people buying stuff, people use it. There is demand for the dollar, right? Because there doesn't need to be demand for dollar, right? Maybe everybody in the US could just own, I don't know, equities or something, right? But then you'd need to buy stuff, and if you need to buy stuff, you need to get dollars, right? By getting dollars, you're expressing demand on dollars, right? And so this thing that I just described to you, here's an application. It's a payment application that is exerting, by its very usage, it is exerting demand pressure on the stablecoin, right? So it's effectively collateralizing the stablecoin with economic value, like with economic reality. There's no fiat anywhere. There's no actual US dollar in this system, right? What's going on is that the transaction occurs and it pushes on the pressure of the stablecoin. See, so that's, to us, that's like real economic value. There's real economic activity. It's touching crypto. The users have no idea it's touching crypto. The specific thing is like, it's if you buy the equivalent of Uber in Mongolia and you buy a ride and you pay for it, you are paying with crypto. You have no idea you're paying with crypto, but it's just happening, right? And it's accruing into the underlying ecosystem. And now you might ask, if you want to invest in this, how do you invest in this? Well, you can buy Luna directly. These ecosystems are such that you can buy the governance token of the protocol, and it's kind of like owning the equity of a central bank. It really is, right? Like effectively, this thing is acting as a central bank. It's like, how much would it be worth to own the equity of the Federal Reserve of the United States? Well, probably infinite value, right? It's very high value, whatever it is. It's extremely valuable. It's not really clear what. That's basically our investment memo. This is extremely valuable, not sure how. But it rests on underlying economic reality. And I think that's the thing that I've always looked for. Backing up to the reason why we were mentioning this question, how do you know what to invest in? If you're a big skeptic like me, I'm a big skeptic, look for whatever your regular fundamental investing says. My fundamental investing has always said, look for underlying economic value, true demand, and here's a way that it happens to be expressing itself. But that's only one thesis. There are many other ways to do investing, to be clear. But that happens to be ours.
And then, Sam, can I ask you a question, too? I know you've spent some time over the last few days in Jada with different groups as it relates to gaming, the Minister of Esports, the guys running gaming at PIF, the Savvy Gaming Group. Do you see any specific opportunities, and not to put you on the spot here, but in Saudi or with the demographics or the market here, where you think that the communities or the consumers in Saudi can benefit from taking advantage of their own population to create some of these companies?
Yeah, I also want to just go back quickly to the question of how do you invest in this space, in crypto in particular, because I think it's really important. And I actually just, the attempt by some of us to even explain like what's interesting and what's happening in the crypto space, to me, is one of the strongest reasons why, like, definitely if you feel inspired to go out and buy crypto directly yourself, and I think everybody should go learn how to do that and play around with it a little bit. But also I think like what we just heard about Terra and a few other things are a really strong indication of actually how specialized this space is, and why I think whoever it is, it's really important to find people that really understand crypto well if you're going to invest in it, and ideally like we're still very much in a speculative venture stage in the development of this space. Find smart people who do this professionally, like all day long, and back them as I think, instead of trying to go out and figure out for yourselves which one of what are now thousands of potential crypto investment opportunities are available to you. So I would feel like it's important to make that point. In terms of opportunities here in Saudi, I mean, we talked a little bit about this, or I did earlier, just in terms of what seems to me, and has been abundantly clear in just a few short days here, both in Jeddah and now in my conversations in Riyadh, the motivation and energy around building, whether we're talking about the city of the future up in the north, or the infrastructure mandate that I've heard a little bit about to build on the ground here in Riyadh and in Jeddah. I mean, the opportunity when you have 60-something% of your population under the age of 35, when you have a community that are as active and passionate about gaming. We've heard about some of the esports the transactions that have taken place here. I mean, there is an enormous opportunity to activate this young generation and to embrace their love of immersive digital content, to accelerate the pace with which people are going out into the cities of Saudi and engaging in fun and entertainment together, and again, and learning together. I mean, this is really the opportunity, I think, to build something substantial quickly, to take advantage of. I mean, the numbers I've heard that Luis didn't mention, I think I heard it in one meeting, something like close to 1.5 phones per person in Saudi, meaning a decent percentage of the population has 2 or more cell phones. The 5G penetration across the country is astonishing. I mean, this is a place, and then you take from the mandate sort of on high down, this is like a test bed and opportunity to accelerate the speed with which you want to be a modern city and talk to the younger generations. And so I think the opportunity is enormous.
I know we're running behind today, so I think we might have to kind of wrap it at that, but if there are any questions, we might be able to take 1 or 2, and then I think maybe the guys will be hanging around if you want to ask anything after. And if not, we can also proceed to the next panel and catch on. Yeah? Yes.
So this is around actually esports and e-gaming. So usually there is an ecosystem need to be built around actually the creation of this momentum here in Saudi in terms of startups and venture investment activities. So what are these key components that you observed during your visit here in Saudi Arabia that need to be addressed in terms of stimulating this sector? I know it's a big question. It needs a session by itself, but
so if I understand the question is what have we observed that makes us, or at least me, think that gaming is going to be a growth opportunity here in Saudi? Is that the question?
Yeah, and the gaps. What are the gaps mainly? The top 3 gaps we need to focus on to build this momentum in terms of e-gaming and esports.
Yeah, so I mean, you have some of it already, right? In terms of, at least with respect to mobile phone penetration and smartphone penetration, so the first question is just, do people have access, right? I don't actually know. I haven't had a chance yet to understand what the penetration of sort of on the home computer side looks like. I assume it's also decent, but like so many other emerging markets in gaming, I assume a lot of this is happening at the mobile level ahead of, or people have largely skipped PC gaming, and high-powered gaming laptops and that sort of thing. So I assume we're talking largely about mobile phones and smartphones, which is fine. But I think when you have that and you already have, so you have the at least one key component of the infrastructure, you have one of the most exciting demographics for this that I've heard of anywhere that I can think of, frankly. I mean, again, the age being such a substantial percentage of your population is at that key gaming age, and which, like, one important thing to think about there is you're now hitting the point where the emerging business leaders and entrepreneurs of this country are the first generation to have really grown up gaming first and grown up with smartphones first and grown up sort of natively to this technology. So I think you have the infrastructure, and they're related, right? I mean, so you have the infrastructure, you have the people, and then I think you just need to make sure that you allow, like so many places that have really, like when I think about emerging content trends and having been around 20, 25 years ago when, for example, China was really opening up its cinema industry and quickly and rapidly overtook most of the rest of the world in cinema. Like, so much of that was made possible by a mandate to culturally and what you guys have that very few places have in the world is the ability to create a top-down mandate for culture. So I know you're doing it already with your film festival, which has become one of the important, interesting new emerging film festivals in the world. I think you have the opportunity to do something similar with gaming that I would say, I just came from one of the big US game conferences in San Francisco last week called GDC, but we're going to start to see, if you believe that video games will follow any of the trends we've seen in other cultural and important media contexts, I assume we're going to see, and there's an opportunity to create content-first driven gaming conferences and to really like brand Saudi as a place for gamers and that's gamer first, and that's something that you guys could do, and you have the technology and you have the people who want it. So that, for example, and that can be both a physical and digital thing. I think the physical piece of this, especially because I assume most people don't have and are not going to have high-powered gaming laptops immediately, but some may. I think the opportunity to do this in a location-based entertainment type of a way is really interesting too. So create those venues, look back a little bit historically to Asia and some of the other places that led first with location-based gaming venues. And I think there's an opportunity to build that in this environment in a really cool way.
Yeah, I think if I could just chime in on there, because I thought that was a great answer. I think that the location-based nature of this is really compelling. I think that when you look at, so many of the extraordinary projects that are being built in Saudi, over the next, say, 5, 10, 15 years, they're still, ahead of us. And yet you have a captive audience ready to rock and roll today, like really ready to go. And so I think, the existing gaming audience, the captive market is very much there. Social media is, I think Saudi is the number 2 or number 3 social media use per capita in the world. And yeah, massive smartphone penetration here. And so I think the kind of merging of, how are we going to be entertained both physically and digitally today now that we're really ready to go and kind of enabled in that space? How does social media, gaming, and location-based entertainment come together? And really the support that, is being led by the government is extraordinary. So I think that really will also help growth into this kind of, whether that's metaverse or kind of digital identity space. I think that the audience here is already very plugged in, and so I think there will be a lot of innovation in that space, hopefully coming out of the region, in Saudi Arabia in particular.
I think we're going to have to, sorry, go ahead. It's okay. No.
I would just say, I would just add a little bit more awareness on there's so much play-to-earn opportunities, and the beauty about it is you could be based anywhere in the world and be the leader of a digital pack. And, this given already, all the demographics and trends we thought, we already spoke about, I think that's a pretty big opportunity for the locals to explore here.
Okay, the guys will be outside. Feel free to connect and ask questions after, but thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Louise.
guys.
Thank you.